Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda Durheck. I am the Energy and Climate Outreach Associate at Illinois Extension, and I'll be your moderator for today. This webinar is hosted in partnership with Prairie Rivers Network, and I'd like to thank both Randa Watts, their Clean Water Organizer, and Mike Delaney at Illinois Extension for all of their support in coordinating this webinar with me today. Today, we will be exploring community and utility perspectives of data centers with experts from McHenry County, Ameren, ComEd, and the Farm Bureau. This is part 2 of a 3-part webinar series focused on data centers. Part 1 was held last week, and part 3 will be coming in February. We hope that this webinar will help local leaders and others better understand how data centers are affecting their communities and what to consider when these projects come knocking. So first, I'll go over some general guidelines real quick. I'll introduce our first speaker, and then they will go ahead and present. So as always, we are recording this webinar. You will get a link to the recording and contact information for the speakers in the next few days, along with their slides. You can always find local government education webinars on our YouTube channel. I believe Randa is sharing all of these links in the chat for easy access. And of course, if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Speakers may answer throughout the webinar, and we will also have 10 to 15 minutes dedicated for questions at the end. So with all that, here is our agenda for today, and I will introduce our first speaker. Scott Kuykendall is the Water Resources Specialist for the McHenry County Department of Planning and Development. He oversees the county's scientific studies on groundwater, helps develop water resources policy, maintains the county's environmental compliance, and provides education and outreach. Scott earned a bachelor's degree in geography with a focus on environmental planning from Southern Illinois University and a graduate certificate in environmental management and sustainability from the Illinois Institute of Technology. I will hand it over to you, Scott.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us today and the opportunity to speak with you. Go ahead. All right. Does that look good?
Could you put it in presenter mode?
Is it not in presenter mode?
Nope, it is. Perfect. Perfect. It was just delayed.
Okay. All right. So once again, my name is Scott Kuykendall, Water Resources Specialist for McHenry County. And while I am very knowledgeable on water resources, I am not an expert on data centers. But as this has become a bigger and bigger issue, I've had to spend quite a bit of time figuring out how these systems work and their real relationship with water. There's a lot of confusing information out there, and so I'm sharing with you today what I've learned. So first off, water is necessary for every living thing on the planet. Whether you're in the tropics, the tundra, or the Midwest, every living thing on the planet needs water because it's vital to life. It is also our #1 economic driver. People will not invest in homes or businesses if they don't have access to safe, clean, reliable, and affordable water. So our water is our #1 economic driver. And this is a map showing water resources for public facilities in Illinois. And the dark blue up in the top right is, of course, Lake Michigan water. Illinois gets their water from Lake Michigan under a Lake Michigan allocation. This is part of a Supreme Court decision that set the amount of water Illinois can remove. That water includes both the drinking water and all the storm water that we have diverted from the Lake Michigan watershed. If we start exceeding the amount that we are allowed, then municipalities' availability of water will start to decrease. So it's very important to understand that. Lake Michigan is not unlimited. Most of the rest of Northern Illinois and many parts of Central Illinois get their water from groundwater. Here in McHenry County, we're 100% dependent on groundwater. Downstate, they don't have access to groundwater, and so most of Central and Southern Illinois municipalities or public facilities rely on reservoirs where they've dammed up a stream or a river and flooded a valley. And then a few places do get water from rivers, but that's a very challenging water source, both from a water quality and a quantity standpoint. This is a cross-sectional view of the geology in northeastern Illinois. And the dark brown up in the top left represents sand and gravel. So up in our area, we have a lot more sand and gravel than the rest of the state. Below that is limestone. Both of those are recharged locally. So when it rains or snow melts, water is able to percolate downward and fill any gaps and voids in the sand and gravel or cracks and fissures in the limestone. Here in McHenry County, we have 30 to 40,000 private wells getting their water from those two aquifers. We also have 3 deep bedrock aquifers. These are made of sandstone. They're ancient geological features shown in blue here. The uppermost one is called St. Peter. That is not widely used in our area because it's largely been desaturated and it's a soft, friable rock that breaks apart easy. So the main aquifer that we use in the sandstone is the middle one called the Ironton Galesville. Our wells to that aquifer are about 1,500 feet deep. That is not recharged locally. Most of the water that we're getting from that aquifer is coming from north central Wisconsin, where that rock layer rises towards the surface. So when it rains or snow melts up in Wisconsin, it can get down in that aquifer and slowly make its way towards us. But it can take thousands or thousands of years for water to make that trip. And so as soon as we're pulling water out of that aquifer, the water table is dropping. This is another set of maps showing the distribution of the different aquifers in the state. So we have sand and gravel, limestone, and sandstone. I do want to point out that in central Illinois, they do have a layer of sandstone aquifer called the Mahomet Aquifer. And Champaign and many parts of central Illinois, that is their sole source of water. If that water were to become contaminated or drawn down and no longer available, those areas have no other source. The Mahomet Aquifer is their sole source of water. So very important to keep that in mind when we're thinking about increased demands on water. Like I said, the deep bedrock aquifer is not recharged locally. It's not a sustainable aquifer. And this is a set of maps that were put together by the Illinois State Water Survey for the city of Joliet. Many people may be aware of this, but Joliet has less than 10 years worth of water left. They have dropped the water table in the Ironton Galesville aquifer by about 1,000 feet. That 1,000 feet drawdown extends outward in a cone shape. It's called a cone of depression. And so underneath McHenry County, they've drawn the water table down below us by about 400 feet in the southeast corner of our county, where our population density is the greatest. And we do expect to have shortages in that aquifer in the not too distant future. You can see DeKalb County, just to our southwest, is not nearly as in dire situation as us. So water resource issues are very, very local. But Joliet is running out of water, and they're faced with the hard decision to spend about $1 billion to run a pipeline to Chicago to buy Lake Michigan water directly from Chicago. So for all eternity, for Joliet to remain in existence, they are going to be dependent on the city of Chicago. So these are very real water issues that are happening right here at home. Now, when we talk about data centers, these are facilities that house the servers and computer equipment for digital services such as streaming, cloud computing, and more often for AI. These are unique industries in that they operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and demand a lot of energy and potentially a lot of water throughout the entire period. And then data centers have grown from large systems where a building would encompass about 3 acres to hyperscale facilities on 40 acres or more, and typically have multiple buildings on 500 plus acre campuses. So these are just very unique industries that have high demands for resources. And they locate where they do because they need access to fiber optic networks. They require a lot of energy. And of course, they do need water. And so when we talk about their water demands, they do have direct demands or direct water use, primarily for cooling. The computer systems produce a lot of heat. And for these computers to work properly, they need to be cooled down. They will also use water for general water use and fire suppression, but the main use is cooling. There's also indirect water use from energy production. Energy production typically uses a lot of water, whether it's coal, natural gas, or nuclear power. all of these systems are generating heat and using water to produce steam that actually runs the turbines. These systems also use a lot of water for cooling. I will point out that solar and wind do not need water, and so those should be considered when we are thinking about the portfolio of energy sources to meet all of our future energy needs. Now, as I've tried to figure out how much water these systems actually use, it's very difficult to track. This is largely due to a historical lack of transparency by the data center industry. There's been an absolute lack of readily available, accurate, and consistent information about water use. And this has led to significant confusion and, understandably, public mistrust. There's also no federal or state requirements for reporting water use. So the only way we are going to get accurate information is if local governments require it at the time of permits. And so it's really important for local governments to play a role in this and address these things early in the review process. So hopefully we can improve transparency and get a better sense of water use moving forward. There is no standardized reporting methods for water. So some figures will only identify a very small part of their direct water usage, while other figures will combine all direct and indirect water use. So you'll get reports for the same industry or facility of using 5 million gallons per day or less than a car wash. So it's important to break these things out. Each of these reporting methods is valid depending on the perspective. We need to be able to break out the direct water use for that facility when we're considering what the potential impacts might be to a specific water source like groundwater. If we're looking at the total direct and indirect water use, that is going to be much larger than what is actually being addressed at the specific site. So we need to be able to break out the direct water use separate from the combined direct and water use figures. Now, this is important to keep in mind, though, as these facilities get bigger and bigger and demand more and more energy. You are seeing natural gas plants being built on site or immediately adjacent, and we are likely going to see small nuclear reactors powering these facilities in the future. And they are going to be drawing water from the same source. So in those cases, we will need to be looking at both the direct and indirect water use when we're approving or considering these facilities. This is a simple diagram of a cooling system at a data center. So you have your servers generating heat. You may have a closed loop system providing cooling to those servers, and they're pulling the heat out of those servers, but that heat just doesn't disappear. It is tied to the facility's cooling system. So if they have a closed loop system that is tied to an evaporative cooling system for the actual facility, they are still using a lot of water. Evaporative cooling converts liquid water to vapor to actually pull and remove the heat. If they are using air conditioning and a closed loop system, then that system would be using little or no water. But I have not seen this question asked. It really is important for us to understand how these systems work and make sure we do understand the full demands. If we're only looking at the fact that they have a closed loop system, that is not telling the whole story. What is the facility's cooling system? Is it evaporative cooling or air conditioning? These need to be asked by the local governments and individuals. Now, the industry is doing some amazing things to reduce their water demands. So like I said, they can have a closed loop system where it is direct to chip. So they are running the coolant directly onto the chip that's producing the most heat. And so instead of having to cool a whole building to then cool down that processor, they are taking the cooling directly to it. They are now using dielectric liquids instead of just simple water that are able to remove the heat and cool components more efficiently. Now, it is important to be asking questions, though. So a closed loop water system, that water is going to develop or mineralize over time. and they are either going to have to flush that system and add new water, or they're going to add chemicals, and that's typically what they do, as I understand it. And are those what are those chemicals, and are those chemicals being discharged directly to our wastewater treatment plants? If so, that could be a problem. We don't want our wastewater treatment plants to become a discharge point and have the public carry the burden of managing that waste. The next step up is a two-phase system. So the previous one was just a single phase. This is a two-phase system, which is they're starting to bend the laws of physics here. And so what they use is a special dielectric fluid that boils into vapor at low temperature. So at about 120 degrees, this specialized dielectric liquid turns into vapor, which then pulls the heat out of the system into coils, which then run it away from your servers. As it cools down, the vapor turns back into liquid and is part of the closed loop system. Absolutely fascinating work being done in this field. But once again, what are the chemicals in that dielectric fluid? And are those dielectric fluids being managed properly? Or is there a way that these things could end up in our wastewater treatment plants or into the environment? I have seen nobody addressing this issue, and it is vitally important for us to know this and for local governments to know that they're not having these chemicals dumped onto them. Important questions. And then going further into science fiction, it is using liquid immersion, where the servers are actually submersed entirely in this non-conductive dielectric fluid. This is able to capture and remove heat much more efficiently. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Once again, concerned about the chemicals, but this is a great example of kind of a win-win situation. While there might be a higher upfront cost, because it's so efficient, they're able to stack more units more closely together, thereby improving their performance. But once again, you need to know what the system is and what the facility's cooling system is. If they're using a closed loop and air conditioning, then that's going to be a much more water efficient system. They may be using little or no water in that type of a system, but it will be using more energy. And typically these facilities want to reduce their energy consumption. Now, there is no one right way to do all this. There are many cooling tools in the toolbox, and it'll be fascinating to see where we go from here. But all of these questions need to be asked. It's very important for local governments to understand how these systems work, what questions they need to ask, and for the public to be better informed and asking the right questions of their local leaders and these facilities. And hopefully, moving forward, we can have much greater transparency and have a better understanding of the benefits and challenges that these facilities pose. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Scott. That was very insightful. With that, we will be passing over to our next two speakers. So I will go ahead and introduce them now. So Alex Scharf is the Business Development Executive at Ameren, Illinois Economic Development. Alex specializes in leading large load interconnection projects, particularly data centers and other energy-intensive industries throughout the site selection process. He also supports community partners across the Ameren, Illinois service territory on various business attraction initiatives. He holds degrees from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and Southern Illinois University Edwardsville. He will be joined by Ed Sitter, who is the Senior Manager of Economic Development at ComEd, where he oversees the company's strategies and efforts to recruit and retain large business customers that grow jobs and investment in key industries across Northern Illinois. Ed is a 31-year veteran of the company, where he has worked closely with development partners to leverage ComEd's reliable, affordable, and clean energy services to secure major business investment wins for the region. Ed holds a bachelor's degree in urban planning and development and a Bachelor of Science in environmental design with a minor in energy and mineral resources from Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. And I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Really quick, Ed, I think you're sharing the presentation screen. I don't know if there's a way to go to the...
I'll change the display settings. Hold on. No problem.
No, I do that every time too.
There we go. How about that?
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Nope, all good. Thank you, Ed.
I'll go forward on the first.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you. And appreciate being here. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, Alex Scharf with the Ameren, Illinois Economic Development Team. I'm specifically with our Business Attraction Group, and we are focused on bringing new businesses into our service territory. So really quick overview, in case you don't know, Ameren, Illinois, we are the electric and natural gas distribution company serving a large portion of the state of Illinois. Our service territory, as you can see on that map, covers 43,000 square miles, roughly 3/4 of the state. The map there, you can see the green is where we serve electric and natural gas. The blue is electric only. Our headquarters is in Collinsville, Illinois, located in southwestern Illinois, and we are regulated by the Illinois Commerce Commission. Okay, I'm going to give a quick U.S. data center market overview here, and I know Ed's going to dive into some deeper subjects as well. So just to start, as you've all seen too, and why we're here today is that there's just been an explosion in the data center market and the demand we're seeing. A lot of that driven by growth in artificial intelligence, and that chart there on the upper left corner there shows that there's the potential for this to continue through the end of this decade and into the next. And these data centers aren't just locating in traditional locations and the traditional hubs where they have located in the past. There's new hubs emerging and developing across the country, and that presents a unique opportunity for communities and regions in our service territory to compete for these projects. And so, as you can imagine, these projects can contribute positively to communities through job creation, both construction jobs and permanent jobs, capital investments with some of these projects ranging in the hundreds of millions and into the billions of dollars, and the associated tax growth with those projects. So with this opportunity comes challenges from the utility perspective. We're seeing an unprecedented number of requests from data center groups, whether that's developers in the data center world or even outside the data center world trying to get into the space, landowners interested in because they believe they have a good piece of land near a substation or transmission lines, and of course requests from our community partners trying to navigate these requests as well. To give some perspective, large load projects, they need to interconnect with our high voltage transmission system, and to do that, projects are required to go through a robust transmission study process. Before the end of 2024, early 2025, our team had never had a new business attraction project move forward with an official transmission study request. Enter this past year and moving forward, we've had dozens of study requests completed and more entering the queue seemingly each week, it seems. So this rapid increase in activity has challenged our teams to have to relook at our processes and procedures of how we handle these requests and move them through the process. And ultimately, that the goal there is to advance these opportunities, but even more paramount is to ensure that our existing customers are protected through that process. So that has definitely been a challenge, and I know Ed will speak more to that as well from what they're seeing on the ComEd side. Just to hit some of those other notes in there, we can continue to build a robust pipeline of large load projects throughout our service territory. We've seen it started really with an influx in the southwestern Illinois region near the St. Louis area, but it has since expanded everywhere across our service territory. And we're also starting to see more and more projects looking at not just the electric side, but also natural gas solutions, adding additional complexity. And just the last note I'll mention before turning it over to Ed is that, as you can tell from the siting factors, power drives a lot of these projects, but there's a lot of other things that have to come together. They're very complex projects. So if your community is working with data center projects, if there's sites you believe are promising, or you're planning to market your community towards some of these opportunities, please connect with us. And early engagement and collaboration is critical to advancing these opportunities. So with that, I will turn it over to Ed.
That's your team, I guess, but you'll share that deck.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump into a couple quick things just to build upon that. So ComEd, if you're not familiar with us, we serve basically the northern third of the state that Ameren doesn't serve. So back to his map, it's everything that was in white up there, essentially, with the exception of a few municipal utilities that are in our service territory. So, why sort of Chicago? I'm going to focus more on that, or Chicagoland, Northern Illinois. There's a convergence of fiber optic networks. When those were first laid, they were put mainly along the railroad lines that traverse the country. And if you are a history buff or an urban planner like myself, you know that most of those rail lines converged in the city of Chicago and still do today. got a central location. We talked about the good water that we've got available from the Great Lakes as well as in the aquifers. We're safe from a lot of natural disasters, and we do have state incentives that were passed in 2019. From the power perspective, I mean, we are one of the largest utilities in the country. I think at one time we were third or fourth in terms of customer served and power that flows through that. You know, Chicago itself is a top 5 global market. We're very small compared to what Northern Virginia is. And if you look back a few years ago, you know, positions 2 through 6 were still smaller than number 1 in Northern Virginia. But that is transitioning a little bit. You know, other states have gotten on the data center bandwagon. Customers have looked to spread out a little bit, so they're chasing power availability in many instances. I always like to share this factoid. If you're not familiar, Sprint, you know, which was a phone company, this, interestingly enough, if you don't know, Sprint essentially stands for Southern Pacific Railroad Information Technology. So the railroads started laying fiber for their operational reasons in the southwest part of the country, and then they eventually commercialized that and sold it off and became Sprint. So just wanted to sort of share that tidbit with you. I'm not going to get into a lot of this because we're going to share it, but there's a couple different types of data centers. Pretty much every business these days has some sort of what we consider to be an enterprise data center. So it's just a closet or some room inside an office building or commercial building where they've got servers and computer equipment. Things started to shift towards the MTDC, which is a multi-tenant data center that's more like a shopping mall. So you would have, you know, a Macy's on one end. I'm just using the mall analogy, you know, a JCPenney's, and then you've got a bunch of smaller stores. So you got Foot Locker and Banana Republic and whatever. So those would be the same things, right? You've got hospitals, you've got, you know, insurance companies, you've got tech companies that are all looking to lease those types of spaces. Then there was a shift to something called hyperscale, which is really just the next level up, right? So what was happening with some of the larger technology companies, so, you know, the Googles, Amazons, Metas, Microsofts of the world, were essentially leasing the entire data center or multi-tenant facility and making it their own. And then they started building their own, you know, so those are something that had become more prevalent around the country. We certainly have some here in our service territory, but I just wanted to sort of give some distinction of what the 3 types of data centers are. Alex touched a little bit about this, but, you know, data centers, it's usually about power first. Can they get power? How long is the timeline? Is it available? What other challenges might we have? And I've got some examples there on the right side. That's a substation complex that we have in Plano and Yorkville, Illinois. We have 5 or 6 big data centers that are proposing to connect nearby that because of the power that flows through that facility. And you can see the red and green lines, those are our transmission lines. So that makes a good site because you are proximate to power and to a substation. The example on the bottom, you can see our transmission lines are off to the right there. First of all, you'd have to figure out how you'd get the power from where it is to your site. And then secondly, you can see that pathway is predominantly going to be residential, which is always a challenge. And then the site itself is surrounded by residential. And data centers these days do not want anything to do with residential. They don't want to be by them. They don't want to see them because they're just drawing attention to themselves. And there's a lot of community pushback, as you've probably been reading in the media, you know, from noise concerns, water concerns, vibration concerns, traffic, all that stuff. Now, I think the flip side is from a traffic standpoint, data centers don't have a lot of employees compared to, you know, a industrial facility or a warehouse facility, for example. So if you have a site and you've got an opportunity to attract, let's say, an Amazon or a FedEx or UPS facility that's going to have hundreds of trucks a day in and out, plus thousands of employees there, some communities would rather have a data center because it's not going to generate the traffic that, you know, creates congestion. And again, that's less of an issue maybe when you get outside the metropolitan Chicago area, but it is an issue, you know, the closer you are into this area up here. Typically, they're looking for 100+ acres for the larger campuses, but that doesn't mean that they can't build, you know, a smaller 200 or 300,000 square foot building. The image there on the left, that's a rendering from the Meta project that's in DeKalb. That's just one of the buildings that they've got on that campus. They've got, I think, 3 buildings up now, and there's a substation there sort of in the background. I'm not going to go through this in detail because I'm just sensitive at the time and I want to get to the next thing. You can look at this. This sort of just breaks down the number of customers and the typical size that we see in our service territory, for existing, non-residential customers as well as the data centers there. So we're experiencing, similar to Ameren, a dramatic and unprecedented increase, in large power projects. We're at about 100 large ones. It's well over 30,000 megawatts of capacity. That's like 60,000 Costco's would be another way to look at that. It's tremendous impact. We have an obligation to serve them regulatorily. The challenge that Illinois has is that they deregulated the state in the late 90s, so the power generation side of things is competitively priced, and it's a separate market. The utilities don't control that. And then compounding that is we're also in 2 different multi-state transmission organizations. So ComEd in the north is in PJM, which extends from the Mississippi River to the East Coast. And then Ameren is in MISO, which is basically the central part of the country, which, all up into Canada, through Illinois, Iowa, and down into Louisiana. So both are multi-state, power pools, if you will. So the generation providers sell their generation into that market, and then the utilities, transmit it from those power plants and then distribute it to local users. So I do want to highlight some things that ComEd is doing. I know Ameren, I think you've got some proposed changes that you will be submitting at some point, probably this year. But we filed some changes with the Illinois Commerce Commission back in June of last year, really in an effort to protect customers and to decrease speculative behavior. We have a lot of projects in our pipeline that probably will never execute. It's just a landowner or some developer that grabbed a piece of property that's adjacent to power, and then they put in an application, and they're hoping to flip out of it by selling it to an end user or somebody. So we're planning to increase our upfront application deposits significantly from the $1 million we currently collect. We're expanding our line extension tariff to include on-property facilities, so the substation that we would build. And then the big thing is securing transmission revenue protection through transmission security agreements. And we issued a press release 2 weeks ago now that we actually signed 8 of these in December. It represents about $2.1 billion of revenue over the next 10 years from those 8 companies, whether they use the power or not. Essentially, it's a take or pay contract. They're going to pay us that. The intent here is, as we expand our system to protect those or to serve those customers and increase transmission capacity, if that load doesn't show up, that means we have overspent and our customers have overpaid. So if these new customers underperform and let's say they only hit 50% of what their loads are, then that theoretically might mean $1 billion of revenue that we have taken in that we are going to essentially refund back to all existing customers as a ratepayer protection. Last thing I'm going to share, and I'm right at time. If you're not familiar with your transmission system that runs through your area, there's a great website called openinframap.org. It's highlighted there. That has for the entire globe, all transmission lines, all substations, and all generating facilities around the country. That is a public open source system. I don't know who built it. I know we can't give out our maps, neither can Ameren. It's always a challenge, but we do point people to this all the time. It does not have the distribution system, so the local sort of wood poles, but it does have the bigger power lines. We will share these slides. In my deck, there's a lot of appendix information, so I'm not going to go through that, but happy to answer questions when we get to the end.
Thank you both for that excellent overview of energy and planning considerations for communities. With that, I will introduce our final speaker, who will be offering a rural perspective. Bill Bodine is the Director of Business and Regulatory Affairs in the Illinois Farm Bureau Governmental Affairs and Commodities Division. Bill and his team manage issues associated with business regulation and property rights, utilities and energy, renewable fuels, transportation and infrastructure, and industry affairs. He joined the Illinois Farm Bureau in August 2003 and has served in several roles within the organization.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Can you hear me okay? And does my screen look all right?
Yes, that looks perfect.
Great. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. I'm glad you were able to join us and talk about this issue. As Linda mentioned, part of my responsibility within the Illinois Farm Bureau is managing energy issues. And more recently, that means I've had some involvement with data centers and the perspective that our members have around data centers. First, a little about our organization if you're not familiar with us. We are Illinois' largest agricultural organization. We represent over 70,000 farmers and landowners. Those farmers and landowners join through county farm bureaus. And so we have county farm bureaus representing members in every county in Illinois. We're also a member of the American Farm Bureau Federation at the national level. So we work at all levels, local through our county farm bureaus, us as a statewide organization at the state level, and then through the American Farm Bureau Federation, we work at the federal level as well. And our mission is to improve the economic well-being of agriculture and enrich the quality of farm family life. So that's the focus and the basis for everything that we do as an organization. And Ed talked a little bit about Chicago being a target area for data centers. We are starting to see rural areas be targeted for these types of projects. And as a result, our members are starting to take note. They've started to raise some questions and some concerns about these projects. And so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that with you today. It's important to understand the context or kind of the environment that our members are working within right now, because that does influence their perspective on these particular types of projects. The chart that I have up here just shows the current status of input costs related to revenue for our farmers. And the numbers aren't important, it's the trends that are important here. And the red line being revenue, you can see that our farmers have been facing net negative revenue for about the last 3 years. We're on the verge of a significant financial crisis in agriculture. And so that's something that our farmers take very seriously. The cost of production, their input costs are something they're very sensitive to. I've seen some information that in Illinois, your traditional corn and soybean farmer could be facing anywhere from, say, $70 to $80 per acre loss in 2026. So anything that increases those input costs is something that our farmers are going to be concerned with. We're also facing what I like to call land use fatigue. The renewable energy transition that's happening in Illinois, in many cases, is happening in rural areas. And so our members are facing proposed wind projects, proposed solar projects, proposed transmission line projects, carbon capture and storage projects that include large-scale pipeline proposals. There is a lot of demand for land and land use right now. Now, that could present an opportunity for some of our members. For other members, it presents some risk because it means limited access to land, and land is important for what they do on their farm. This is leading to some fatigue. My members and landowners, when they reach out, some of them are just getting frustrated with the fact that they're contacted about multiple different projects. There's a lot of people reaching out wanting to get access to land, and they're, to be quite honest, getting tired of it. Now you layer data centers on top of this. And so this is just another potential land use that is adding to the fatigue level that we have in some rural areas where they're seeing a lot of these particular proposals. And that leads to the concerns that I'm hearing from our members most. And these will not be a surprise because they're the same concerns we've been talking about as part of this webinar and other webinars on data centers. The first, and these are probably in order of what I hear most often from our members, but the first thing that I do often hear is sensitivity to potential electricity price increases. If you think back to that chart I showed you about the difference between what input costs have been doing and what their revenues have been doing, anything that's going to further drive up input costs, including electricity, is going to be something that raises some concerns for our members. Our members are significant electricity users. If you're a grain farmer and you have a grain bin, you have grain dryers, you're going to be using a lot of electricity. If you are a livestock farmer, you may have barn fans and cooling systems that use a lot of electricity. So anything that drives up those prices are something that they're going to have some concerns with. I'm also hearing about water use requirements, and Scott talked a lot about this. As we think about rural areas, our members want to ensure that if there is a significant draw on water use, it's not going to have an impact on other rural water users. They raise concerns about continued reliability of the electric grid. Again, not only is it about electricity prices, but our farmers need that electricity when they need it. If there's a reliability issue that surfaces as a result of additional large loads being placed on the system, that's something that they have some concerns with. And then I've been hearing just general concerns about transparency regarding these proposals, making sure that information is provided to the public so they understand what those potential impacts could be and can make a determination of whether they think it has an impact on rural communities. Now, we, as an organization, we pride ourselves on being grassroots driven. Our members develop internal policies that set the positions for our organization. So we have had a lot of conversation recently about data centers. I was in Anaheim, California last week at our national convention, where data centers got a lot of attention within the American Farm Bureau Federation. And so our members have established policies at both the federal and state levels around data centers that are going to guide us as an organization as we think about how these proposals may impact rural areas. What I have on the screen right now is just a selection of the policy statements that were implemented by our members at last week's national convention. It is not the entire policy. I want to be clear about that. There are some additional topics that are covered by that policy, but these are the ones that I thought were probably most relevant to today's conversation. First, we do support responsible development of data centers. And I will characterize all this policy kind of in that bucket, responsible development. We recognize their economic benefits, but we want to be responsible about stewarding those local resources and protecting private property rights. Energy consumption should be managed responsibly. Efficiency measures should be utilized. We also support legislative and regulatory efforts to ensure data centers are sited in a manner that safeguards water supplies. Again, I go back to that concern that we've heard about water. And we also can be supportive of the implementation of large load tariffs that ensure large load users are paying their fair share for energy, so it doesn't put further strain on our agricultural electricity costs. Again, thinking back to those input costs for our members. So those are some policy statements from a national perspective. And then the Illinois Farm Bureau annual meeting is in December in Chicago. And so at that meeting in Chicago, there was, again, a lot of conversation at the state level about data centers. And they passed a couple of policy statements that'll be guiding direction for us at the state organization, where we support data centers filing a water withdrawal plan as a part of a special use permit application with the county that would involve the Illinois State Water Survey determining what the possible water use impacts could be. I go back to what Scott was talking about, how local governments, as a part of the permitting process, can require this information to assure that everyone is aware of what potential water impacts could be. We would support a proposal like that. Our members also did pass a policy that we oppose the development of data centers that could decrease the reliability of the electric grid, increase the cost of electricity, or have the potential to deplete aquifers that their communities depend on. This is not a blanket statement saying that we oppose all data center proposals. What it says is we're going to review those on a project by project basis and determine what those potential impacts are. That goes back to the transparency, again, getting that information that would be necessary to determine what the potential impacts are, and then make a determination on whether it does create the negative consequences that could lead to a county farm bureau opposing a particular proposed data center project. Now, we at the state organization, when it's a local proposal, we do work with our local county farm bureaus to engage, whether that be at the county level, on taking positions on what may be happening in their local areas. We work very closely with them. They would be the ones who would be determining what their positions would be based upon some of these factors. So it's something that the rural community is taking note of. We've seen proposals in the rural area that could have impact, and our members are starting to discuss what appropriate siting and locating of these projects should be. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of explain what the perspective of our organization is on the issue, and I do look forward to answering any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you again to all of our speakers for their presentations. Now we have about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So we already have gotten some questions in the chat, but we'll open it up now. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in and we will try and get it answered.
And I did answer one question already in the chat, and that's so I see it dropped out of it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I believe once you've answered it, then everyone can view the answers.
Okay, I didn't answer the other ones because those are a little more difficult or weren't for me.
Yes, some of them are very specific.
Shall I go ahead and tackle the ones that are water related?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess the first one, I have data centers consider dry cooling towers for cooling. I am not familiar with what dry cooling towers would be, but at 15 minutes, I was only able to touch on a few items. I had trouble condensing an hour-long presentation into 15 minutes as it was. But there are a lot of technologies that are being used. I believe the data center in Hoffman Estates used geothermal cooling, which would have reduced their cooling needs. They will do what's called free air or free cooling, where on cold days like this, they'll use the ambient temperature of the outdoors to cool the building, reducing the energy demand and the water demand. So there are a lot of tools in the toolbox, like I said, and I am not a data center expert, but I did want to try and provide a foundation for people then to continue asking questions and move forward. Joseph asked, why are these discharge questions addressed in their NPDES permitting process? I think he probably said, why aren't these discharge questions addressed in their NPDES permit process? And they should be. So when we're talking about the proper management of the cooling liquids, this is a real concern, and I have found no information about it. So I reached out to the IEPA, and I don't get the sense that even the regulators have this on their radar. But it should be addressed as part of their overall point source permitting, because it is a part of their process. So ideally, it would be taken care of. I have to imagine that these chemicals are expensive, so hopefully there's a system set up for them to take out the old and put new in. They can't shut these systems down, so it has to be done as these things are operating. So hopefully there's a system all in place, but this is where the lack of transparency comes into place. I would love it if they were sharing this information. I think it could actually generate a lot of goodwill if they're proving that these things are being taken care of and that there are proper systems in place. I want to know the answer to this as well. But I am concerned that they also have properly trained people managing these things. Some of the worst pollution that we have entire aquifers that are unavailable due to contamination from industries where they were using solvents and dump the solvents out the back door. That leaches down into the groundwater, and economic development, individual health, all these things are impacted out of that negligence. So I do want to make sure that we're not introducing these chemicals in a way that could be misused or just improperly disposed of. Patrick talks about little takes place about the enormous impacts of land use from data centers, and that's a very real issue. So you can kind of think of our groundwater our groundwater areas as bank accounts. And so in a natural area, before it's been compacted or paved, most of that water is actually infiltrating down and recharging our shallow aquifers, at least. If we pave over everything, we're contributing less, but taking more and more out. And that is something, at least in McHenry County, we do take very seriously. We have a sensitive aquifer recharge areas map that we've developed. We have three-dimensional mapping of our subsurface geology. If you want to look into that, we have all this on our website, mchenryh2o.com. We've got some great resources that are available. So mchenryh2o.com.
Can I jump in real quick?
Please do. I think the rest is on you, Bill. Thanks.
I'll jump in on Patrick's question. He also mentions water flows from natural patterns to higher speed constricted runoff. And I think the question is, are those concerns that only local governments can address? Currently, I believe my answer would be yes. It could be handled through stormwater management and those kind of things. In a rural area, and we think about drainage and water management from a rural perspective. So one of the issues that we and some of our members have raised is about rural drainage. And in many areas of Illinois, the productive capability of our soils is based on ability to drain it. There's underground drainage systems through a lot of the farm ground in Illinois. And I know one of the topics of conversation for a proposed large-scale data center project in central Illinois is what is the impact on surrounding agricultural drainage? So counties are looking into that and having conversations with the developers on how they're going to try to address drainage issues, especially from a farm perspective. Next question, also from Patrick, talks about, the Farm Bureau says we're going to review project by project. Do we have an overall master plan for large areas? I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to as far as a master plan. We don't. We would review individual projects and determine what those impacts are. So I don't know that I can answer that any further to say, we are looking at each individual project. And then the question about DeKalb County Farm Bureau's position on the data center that was constructed there. I don't know what their specific position was. That project was developed prior to us having policy on the particular issue, so I don't know if they engaged or not, and we didn't have a lot of direction at that time. So that was an earlier project. Obviously, as we've seen more development, that's when our members got more engaged and started to develop positions that our organization would take forward as we think about these projects.
Yeah, I think the other piece, you know, as it relates to power, every request has to be studied independently. Now, we may study those in a group or a batch or what we call a cluster. So that we can't just say this is a great site because tomorrow the transmission and distribution systems could completely change because of a different customer that came in or a different customer that closed or a power generator that came on or expanded or closed. So that it's a dynamic system that's always changing. I would think the water and wastewater is very similar. Has to be studied. Other questions?
We had a question that was, how does the Farm Bureau determine the impact on energy cost of a locally sited data center when the supply cost of electricity is spread across MISO or other grids without consideration of local use?
That can be a challenge, I admit that, especially as we think about capacity being one of the driving factors for electricity price increases in Illinois more recently. But the example that I can think of, again, I think about there is a proposed data center in central Illinois that is going to be served by a rural electric cooperative. And the rural electric cooperative claims that they are going to separate that load, that demand, and contract for it separately. They do not participate. My understanding is they don't participate in capacity markets within MISO. And so their determination is that the impact on their cooperative users, which would be our members, is very, very limited. So that's an example. It's not perfect. I understand that. And there are challenges because some of this cost is going to be spread across a much bigger area, especially as we think about capacity.
We have another question here. It's about models. So let's see if we're clear at this one. Are there no models like GREET that would give a comprehensive view of the power, water, and waste of a data center?
I don't know.
Or are there other models that you all use or would recommend?
And I guess that's what I was getting at with my answer a second ago about it has to be studied. I don't know what GREET stands for.
That's totally fair. We will move on to the next question, unless Alex, you want to add something here.
No, I was actually I was the same way Ed, and I was looking up. It looks like if the question submitter can comment on that, but it looks like there's a model where it's greenhouse gases, regulated emissions, and energy use and technologies. So I'll have to look into that.
GREET is, I can maybe provide some context, but GREET is a model that determines a life cycle analysis of carbon emissions from certain product pathways. As an example, it's often used around renewable fuels for ethanol and biodiesel to determine what the total carbon emissions would be for the life cycle analysis. I don't know that it would apply in a data center context, but sure we could probably look into it.
Thank you for that. We also have a question about sustainable energy systems. You know, would it be possible to put solar arrays on rooftops of data centers?
The easy answer there is no, because two reasons. Number one, they use the rooftops for all of their other HVAC and, pumps and parts of their facility is the one reason. But the other reason is even if they could put solar on the roof, it would contribute minimal amount of power to that facility compared to what they're actually using. Plus, solar only works when the sun is out, and it's a 24-hour facility.
I appreciate that. I feel like I've heard a lot about, putting solar on the rooftops. So glad to have that answered. We do have a question.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We encourage solar. There's a lot of warehouse buildings that don't have a lot of where you're starting to see that. And from my personal perspective, I'd love to see that more than covering over, farmland.
Yeah, that makes sense. We do have a question about water. So maybe Scott, this will be one for you. Is there any study on the effects of pattern tailing and having the water running more directly through the tributaries instead of moving downward to replenish the water table? It's pretty specific.
Yeah, that's I'm having trouble visualizing. I guess I was trying to think of how it would apply to a data center, but that does sound like a broader question. I'm trying. Is there any study on the effects of pattern tiling? Yeah, I don't. It sounds like this has to do with agricultural drain tiles, and it is an interesting question. You can put caps on the end of the drain tiles, let them drain freely in the spring when you need to move the water off, and close them when the rest of the year, and that backs the water up, allows for infiltration, reduces stress on downstream resources. I don't know if that's what he's getting at, but it's a bit more detailed than I'm prepared to talk about. Patrick right above that did have a question about the cumulative effects, and I did want to touch on that. He's probably talking more broadly about energy and water. But it's very important for the local governments to be looking not only at this particular project that they are voting on or reviewing, but all the other projects that might be coming in. Often these data centers cluster, and so DeKalb just got a second data center that's going to be built out there. And so you have to be looking at the potential cumulative impact of multiple new demands on your water supplies, not just case by case, just given the nature of data centers clustering in the same vicinity.
Thank you, Scott. That's actually a great segue to our next question. They're asking, are any of you aware of a good model ordinance that municipalities or counties could use as a jumping off point for developing local regulations when it comes to data centers?
I don't.
I am not aware of a model ordinance myself. We have worked with the Illinois Association of County Board Members in development of model ordinances around wind and solar in the past, but I'm not aware of one being developed around data centers. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the near future.
Well, and Ed and I are part of a data center task force to the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and we are looking to develop guidance. I don't know if it'll be a model ordinance, but we are looking to provide guidance for municipalities, and not just the water resources, but all the different aspects of data centers facing municipalities. So I guess keep an eye out for what the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus produces, and really great question. Hopefully we can create a template both for questions to be asked and a model ordinance that municipalities can follow.
Yes, it looks like there's a great need for tools that communities can use for addressing data centers. As we're kind of getting close to the end of this, I have a question for you all. What are some key questions that you think communities should consider when they're being approached by a data center? Like the key things to ask to get that conversation started, start getting the information they need.
Like I use a diagram showing the illustration of the data center's cooling, and you really need to ask not just what are you doing to cool around the servers, but what is your actual facility doing for cooling? Because if they're using evaporative cooling, they're going to be using a lot of water, and so you need to get the total direct demand for water for a facility early in the process.
Engage your utility partners as well. Not for Ameren and ComEd, just so you can get a general understanding of their ability to serve. They can't give specifics, obviously, till they get a request, but having that relationship there, so when you do get that inquiry, whether it's a data center or some other industrial, is always important. So if you don't know Alex and I or our peers, certainly reach out to us.
And I'll add to what Scott mentioned about water usage. As you saw, we have a policy statement that would request a water withdrawal plan. I think you ask the question and get the plan, right? Get information and details about how the proposed project will be utilizing water, where that water is going to be coming from. There are some, whether it could be coming from groundwater, or it could be coming from a water supply system or a rural water supply system. Both of those sources are important to know where that water usage is coming from, and what that total volume will be, and what the potential impacts could be on other water users in the area.
Thank you all so much for your answers to that question. We are at time, but I would just like to thank our speakers again for their willingness to present. We will be sharing out their slides and their contact information. So if you have other questions that were not answered, please feel free to reach out to our speakers. We will be doing a third part for this webinar series in February, really diving into what communities can do and hoping to answer some of those questions as well, and continuing to do this conversation and have more resources for you all. So thanks again to everyone for joining, and thanks to our speakers. We'll see you on our next webinar in February.
Bye all.
Bye.